Good morning, Scouts, and thanks for joining me this morning for this webinar to chat about profiling your website visitors using Google Analytics. I'm Erica Stacey from Scout Digital Marketing and Training. I have had all sorts of issues getting this webinar ready this morning, and it's going to be fine for the people who are on here, but I have a really terrible feeling that there's a number of people who are having difficulty joining. I won't go into details, but I'm very sorry about that, and the recording will be available afterwards. So if you are having any issues, or if somebody has let you know that they're having issues, then that is the reason why, and I will sort the recording out later. So apologies for that. I'm trialling a new system today, and it has quite a number of quirks. So I've been on their support for the last hour or so, getting sorted so we can actually begin. So as I mentioned, I'm Erica, Scout Digital Marketing and Training. I've been using Google Analytics for about 10 years now, I think. So certainly a lot more in the last 5 or 6 years, actually the last 8 years, but have been using it for a really long time. I'm Google Analytics certified, run reports and manage analytics for a huge number of websites, as well as running the Scout Digital training courses in Google Analytics and a few other topics. So hopefully you can all hear me. If you can't, let me know in the chat box. We do have a chat box below. If you have any questions, do feel free to pop them in there. We're going to be running for about an hour this morning, so I'm going to be showing you through some of my favourite reports in Google Analytics that help you get a really good understanding of the types of visitors who are visiting your site. So, as we can see from our slide here, you can learn so much about your visitors from Google Analytics. Obviously, you can learn a lot about what they're doing on your website when you look into page reports and event tracking and conversion tracking and those types of things. But today we're really going to be focusing on the reports that give you a great understanding of the individuals who are coming to your website and the types of characteristics that they hold. This information is really useful because it can help either influence your target audience strategy. So if you're not sure who's coming to your site and what type of people you're attracting with your products and services or your organization, these are the reports that will help you understand the types of people who are coming to your site and the types of people who are most engaged with your site, which is really important. So you can use it for to help influence that market research. But you can also use it to, if you already have a target audience persona and know who you want to attract, these reports can help you understand whether or not you are actually on track with the types of people you are wanting to attract to your website and engage with your products and services. So it can work in both ways. These aren't reports that I necessarily look at regularly, so some of them I will include in my monthly reports, things like locations and devices, which we'll have a look at, but some of them I generally look at over a longer period of time, or after I've done a major campaign or there's been a peak period, to again get that understanding of who's coming to the website, whether or not it's on track with the types of people I'm trying to target, or just simply gathering that information to influence other marketing activities that I'm doing. So I'm going to jump into showing you the reports, and I'm going to switch off the video just so that hopefully it improves. Sometimes I find it can affect the audio a bit. We're going to jump into the reports. I do have a screen at the end which will run through what all of these reports are, but I want to jump into actually having a look at what they are as well. So I'll go bye-bye on the video, and you might be able to see my cat behind me as well. Hopefully he's not going to be too noisy this session, but he looks pretty settled at the moment. Cool, so we're going to switch over to having a look at my desktop here. So this is my Google Analytics account for my Scout Digital Training website. It's a mobile responsive website, and it's focused on promoting the digital training courses that we run here in Adelaide. So Google Analytics, but also social media and a number of other topics as well that you can see there. So these are all the analytics that we're going to be having a look at for this site today. And I'm on the audience overview screen to start off with. So when you log in these days, you go to the home screen, but I've just jumped over here to audience overview to get us started. And like I mentioned, because I'm using this from more of a market research perspective and wanting to get a really good understanding of the types of people who are coming to my website, rather than looking at the last 30 days or the last month, like I would generally do with ongoing monthly reporting, I want to change this date range, and I actually want to look at everything that's happened on the site for the last 12 months. So just to get a really good understanding, this is the advantage that you have when you've been running your reports for a long time, or had your analytics installed for a long time. So we're going to switch this to looking at 12 months worth of data. And we can see obviously there was, things were a bit slower last year. We had a peak at the beginning of the year when we launched all the new courses, and we were running quite a number of advertising campaigns. And it slowed down a little bit in these last couple of months. But one of the things you can see quite quickly, and you might notice this with your own, if you want to be logged into your own Google Analytics and be going along at the same time, then that is great as well. Otherwise you can refer back to this later on. But we can see here that we've got some really clear peaks and troughs, but my website is one of those websites that generally gets visited during the week, Monday to Friday, and drops off a bit on the weekend. So this is kind of a little bit of audience profiling that you can do immediately to get an understanding of when people are coming to your website and what, for most organisations you have a pretty good idea. Retail and hospitality organisations might be seeing businesses might be seeing traffic consistently regardless of the day, but for a lot of B2B organisations, professional organisations, you might tend to have this Monday to Friday up and down as well. So that's the first thing that we can identify from these reports. So all of the reports we're looking at today are going to be in the audience report section. We're not going to be going through every single one of them, but I'm picking and choosing a few that I find are really helpful for giving a bit of an understanding about who's coming to your website, so you can profile them. Obviously we're not looking at personal data. Google Analytics is all about website trends, so we're developing a general picture and a general persona of who's coming to our website. We aren't focusing on anyone in particular. So the first report I'm going to have a look at is demographics here on the left hand side, and I'm going to focus on the overview report. So a lot of these reports do have subcategories that you can delve into in more details, but I want to show you these ones that you might not have actually seen before. Now the demographics section, if you are logged into your Google Analytics and you're not seeing any data here, a couple of these reports that I'm showing you are reports that have to be enabled, and if you don't have any information, you have a prompt there to enable, and you should be able to see data here within about 24 or 48 hours. So the demographics report and the interest report, which we're going to look at next, the way that these reports work is we're actually tapping into Google's broader data sources. So they're not just, obviously we're looking at the people who are coming to your website, but for those who have enabled some level of sharing across their Google account, we're actually tapping into that information there. So you may be able to see at the top, in the top right hand corner of these two graphs, it's giving us a percentage. So it's saying for me, for the age graph on the left hand side, it's 46.39% of total users, and for the gender graph it's 45.52% of total users. So we're not actually seeing 100% of the visitors to the website. And remember, Google Analytics doesn't necessarily capture 100% because if somebody has JavaScript or cookies disabled, then they're not going to be able to, Google Analytics won't be able to run, but that generally accounts for a small portion. So we're actually cutting down that again. So of all of the recorded website activity that Google Analytics has collated, what this is essentially saying is 45% of those people have opted to share that information. So we have to remember we are looking at a smaller group here, and that may influence the results as well. But what is fantastic about this information when you do have it enabled is you can really quickly see, we're looking at users at the moment, so these are the people who are actually coming to the website. We're getting a breakdown of their ages and a breakdown of their gender as well. So really quickly I can see the majority of people who come to my website who have this data sharing turned on are between the ages of 25 and 34 and they're women. So already, and that's something that I can actually confirm with the audience that I know I work with in our training courses, is definitely of that characteristic there. We can see there's a much smaller portion in that 18 to 24 year old age bracket, and it dips off from 34 down towards the 65 plus group as well. So again, a little bit of profiling you can do on your on the demographics of your visitors to get an understanding of who's coming, but it doesn't end there. So in this little drop down menu on the top left hand corner, there's a few key metrics that we can actually jump between. I'm just going to show a couple of them, but once you have this enabled, or if you do, I recommend having a play around with it. So a couple of things that we can have a look at. We can look at the new sessions, percentage of new sessions, and that's actually spread pretty well across the board for me. So the new visitors who are coming to the website for the first time tend to be a mix from all age groups, and it drops off a bit as we get to that 65 plus group. Where it gets a bit more interesting with my data, and again, the thing with these reports is while they are standard across all websites, they're going to be unique to your site, what you offer and your audience. When we get down to average session duration, we can start to see some bigger peaks and troughs here. So we can see that people who are aged 18 to 24 and 35 to 44 tend to spend a lot longer on site than the average. We've got a little bit of a drop in that 25 to 34-year-old age group, which is interesting given they're the highest number of users on the site. But again, it's dropping off dramatically when we get to those older age brackets. So particularly the 65 plus audience, who might not be interested in taking courses in the topics that we offer and are spending an average of 15 seconds on site, compared to our most engaged audience, the 35 to 44-year-olds who are spending over 3 minutes on site. And again, this is important when we get beyond the audience overview report, because if we look at just that average, we get an average of about 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes on site. But we can already see here, while we're looking at smaller portions, there are some really engaged users who are spending longer on site, and it's the people who are in some of these other demographics who are not as engaged and who are bringing that average down. Some other things we can look at are bounce rate. I'll just get a sip of coffee in there, and I know that these reports are taking a little bit longer to change on the screen sharing. Okay, cool. So with our bounce rate, again, it's that older age bracket that have the higher bounce rate. So it's showing again people who are 55 and over are probably the least engaged with my website. And again, looking more at that 25 to 44-year-old age bracket seems to be the users who are most engaged. They have the lowest average bounce rate. And again, we're peaking up quite high from there as well. And we can do the same for pages per session. The people who are viewing the most pages per session are in that 35 to 44-year-old age bracket, and we're dipping down again in that 55 to 64. So you start to get the idea that when you click around in these reports, you build an understanding of, we focus more on the age, but the gender pie chart has been changing as well. you can get a good feel here for the age of the people who are most engaged with your site and those who are least engaged. Obviously, we're not going to be blocking anybody from coming to our website, but it's good for reinforcing our overall marketing plans. And particularly what I find helpful with this type of information is if you're running any Facebook ad campaigns where you can target by age, you can focus on the ages who you know are going to be most engaged with your audience and exclude those who are not as engaged once they get to your website. And that's actually something that I found with some ad campaigns we were running earlier in the year. Because when we first started running these courses, we didn't know who was going to be interested. We had a bit of an idea. We did have a profile, but it was certainly not going to turn anybody away. And we had some quite wide demographic targeting, but we've been able to see, okay, while we were getting quite a bit of traffic from some of those older Facebook users, once they got to our site, they were really not interested. So let's just cut them out, stop advertising to them, and we can focus on the age groups who are much more interested in what it is that we have to offer. So that's our demographics report, and you can click down into more detailed reports for age and gender, but you can get a lot of information just from that overview report that I've shown you here as well. The next report we're going to run through is just below it is interests. And again, if you are clicking into this report yourself and you're not seeing any data, it is because you may not have that data sharing enabled with Google yet, and you just need to turn it on, and within 24 or 48 hours that will be available for you. Again, with our key metric drop down, we've got a few different options we can choose between, but for this report I particularly like focusing on users. And it's giving us some information about their, as the report name implies, their other interests. Why this might be helpful is, again, to help build that picture about the types of topics that your audience are interested in. But if you're looking at conducting other marketing activities or doing some targeted advertising, particularly using Google's display network, this can give you an idea about the types of targeting categories or types of areas that are probably most worth spending your time and your energy. So we've got a couple of categories here. We've got the affinity category, the in-market segment, and the other category. And with all of these, actually I think when we get into the deeper reports, there's some really useful links if you want to click on them to read more information that analytics offers. So just to explain what the affinity category is, affinity audiences were built for businesses who were currently running TV ads who wanted to expand the reach of that campaign with an online presence for an efficient price. This is me quoting Google here, this is not my personal explanation. So these are audiences that Google offers advertisers to reach potential customers at scale and make them aware of their business. Because again, we're tapping into Google's other data and other information and marrying it up with the activities from people on our website. So we can see here for my site, the kind of most popular affinity category is news and politics, avid news readers, entertainment and news enthusiasts. So we can start to, this is, building out that profile of who's visiting our website. We know the age, we know the dominant gender, but they seem to be people who are quite aware of, interested in current affairs, quite active, interested in news and entertainment, and there's some other categories down there as well. The in-market segment is quite an interesting one because this is actually looking at the behaviour of these visitors or their general internet behaviour. These customers, again quoting from Google, these customers are in the market, which means they're actively researching products and are considering buying a service or product like these mentioned. So these are the categories that you can choose from when you're doing targeted display advertising in Google Ads. But again, for our purposes, they're giving us an understanding of the types of topics and the types of other internet activity our website users are engaged with. So there's quite a strong interest in employment, from mine. Business services, advertising and marketing services, which is in line with what, my assumption of our target audiences and the people I see in our training courses, but some other interesting topics as well. I'll come back to this one because there's some, we can make it a little bit more relevant by adding some segmentation on top of it. But it's useful just to get a feel for the overall interest of people who are coming to the website and focusing on those dominant ones. And the reports below give you some information about some more detailed information about those different categories. And like I mentioned, you can hover over, there's question marks there that you can hover over any of these and get some more information, including links to learn more if you want to read about how the audience targeting works. I can share some links to some more information as well. I'm waiting for it to slowly load on your end. Another good excuse for a coffee break. So there you can see how the demographics and the interests reports, they can already help us build a really good picture about who's coming to our website, and like I mentioned, who's quite engaged with it as well. So for you can either use it to start building your audience persona or check that it's online with the types of people you think are coming to your website as well. I'm going to jump down into geolocation now, which is next on the list. And this is one that you probably do look at, and I do look at quite regularly for my audience reporting. So we'll just touch on it quickly. But again, we're talking about how to profile the visitors who are coming to our website and get a good understanding of who's coming to our website. And where they're actually located is important as well. So the default view that we see here is based on country. So we can actually see the most popular country at the top and get an idea of how many people are actually visiting from each of those areas and how engaged they are with the site based on their bounce rate, pages per session, and session duration as well. I'm also tracking conversions on this website. So we can see clearly with running courses in Adelaide, South Australia, I know I have a definite geographic target, but being the World Wide Web, there are always going to be people who come from all over the world to look at different websites. But I've definitely got that dominant audience coming from Australia, and that's where most of the inquiries are coming from as well. Hopefully you have an idea of what your geographic audience is, or if you do offer a global service, this is going to give you a bit more of a feel for who's coming and visiting your website and how engaged they are. But if you do have more of that niche audience, like for me it's not even just Australia, it's more specifically South Australia, I can click on any of those countries, but I've just clicked on Australia, and I can have a look more closely at the state-based information. So we can look at specifically South Australia, what percentage of users are coming from there and how engaged they are with the site versus the rest of the country and even other countries as well. The other option you have, if you have a really, really specific geographic location, is to look at city, and that report just sits next door to it. So again, we could focus really specifically on just looking at people from Adelaide. In my instance, or it's might be different for you, and profile there. The things to keep in mind with the city-based report is it's actually the location of the ISP or the internet service provider that the individual's using. It might not necessarily be their physical location, so it's wherever their device, whether it's they're on a laptop or a mobile, it's tapping in to that nearest internet service provider, and they aren't located in every single town or every single state, so we can't get that granular with our location, but it can give us a pretty good idea of the locations of where our audience are. So that's all I wanted to show you in the geo report, because again, we're building that picture of our users, and that's a really useful one there. And if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in that chat box. The next one I want to jump to is directly below. It's in behaviour, and specifically we're going to be looking at new versus returning. So this is a report that you do actually see on your audience overview. It's the pie chart that sits on the right hand side, normally green and blue, and shows the number of new visitors versus returning visitors. So the new visitors are people who have visited your website for the first time during that period, and the returning visitors are those who have come multiple times during that period. And this is going to be different for every single organisation depending on again, who your users are, who your target audience is, but what it is that you offer as well. And there's no right or wrong answer. So some businesses rely on a constant flow of new visitors to the website because they may just be coming in, getting one thing and going. Or you may want to build up a community of people who return as well. What's great about this report, beyond just the breakdown of the percentages that we see on the audience overview report, is you can look at the characteristics of what they're doing on your site, the behaviour. We're in the behaviour section. So the amount of pages that they're looking at, their bounce rate, their average session duration, and if they've completed any conversions on your website as well. So this can be good. Some people, depending on your product or service, might be researching, so they might come and visit your website a couple of times before they get in touch or download something or make a purchase or whatever it is that you offer. Whereas some people may just be coming that once, and if your website's not engaging enough or not memorable enough, they might actually leave. We're looking at a really big time period here, so you can imagine over that time there are going to be a lot of new visitors. And again, we're looking at our global audience, we're looking at all users. Even though we know we've got a much smaller target audience being people within South Australia. But useful just to, like I said, have a look at the types of behaviour between them and think about maybe, particularly if you want to try and attract more returning visitors, people who come more than once, what are the ways that you can do that? So if you've got quite a static website with information that's not changing very regularly, it's going to be unlikely that people are going to be coming repeatedly. If you're regularly adding new content and your users are aware of that, such as a blog or case studies or a news section, they may be more likely to come back and visit your site regularly, or you may need to prompt and remind them to come back regularly as well. So things like emails and regular email newsletters are really useful for driving traffic to your website, because people might not necessarily be thinking to themselves, I have to go and visit that website again today. Particularly if you're reminding them, okay, we've just updated our courses, we've just shared some new blog posts, all those types of things. This website in particular doesn't have a blog on it, it's just the courses listed on there. So a lot of people are just going to come once or twice, have a look at what's available, and if they're interested, book it and maybe come back in the future. So there's not we do updates, major updates kind of every 3 to 4 months, as opposed to like weekly or fortnightly or even monthly blog posts at this stage. So do check out that behaviour new versus returning report to get a feel for the people who are coming to your website and what they're actually doing. I'm also quickly going to touch on the technology report, which is just below, and specifically looking at browser and operating system. Back in my agency days, and we would do a lot of web development, we'd use this report when we were redeveloping websites to get an understanding of the browsers that people were using most often, and they're the ones that we would focus on for browser testing. So that's how we used to use this report. But again, when we're looking at a profiling perspective, this report may or may not be useful to get an understanding, again, of the characteristics of your users based on what type of technology they're using. So 43% of the people who come to this website are visiting it via Chrome. So again, from a usability perspective, it's good to know that your website works really well in the most popular browsers. But you may also be able to draw from that some ideas of that audience persona. So Chrome tends to be very popular with people who are a little bit more internet savvy, because often it does have to be downloaded and installed. So So that may be a characteristic they can take away from it. There's also a lot of plugins and apps and other things that work with Chrome that those users tend to use as well, rather than the default browsers that a lot of systems use. So again, there might be little bits of information you can pull from that. Otherwise, if nothing else, it's great to know, make sure your website works really well in these particular browsers, because that's where the majority of people are actually viewing it from. In a similar topic, I'm going to jump down to mobile just below. And again, this is a report that I do tend to keep more close an eye on. So geo and mobile are ones that I do look at regularly. But it's really useful as part of this profiling perspective, because we can get an understanding of the devices that our users are using most often to access the website and how effective they may be. And this is something that's definitely on my list at the moment, because I've gone through all these reports on my site and I have a big list of things to update. At the moment, so we've got our breakdown here of mobile, desktop and tablet. Again, we're looking at all users. So over 50% of traffic to the website is coming just from mobile, let alone mobile devices. We've only got just over 41% of people who are visiting the website from desktop computers, and they do by far are the most engaged with the current website based on pages per session and average session duration as well. The engagement with the site drops off considerably on tablet and mobile, so people on tablet are staying a little bit longer and viewing a few more pages, but with mobile it's quite small. This we can view in a couple of ways, because I often find a lot of mobile engagement stats do tend to be quite low, even though the overall number of visitors can be quite high. And you've got to keep in mind that people who are browsing on mobile are often browsing a lot more quickly. They won't be just leaving tabs open, which a lot of us do when we're on desktops. We're looking for something really quickly, we're reading something, we're getting some information, very action oriented on our mobiles, and then we shut it down and we go and do something else or keep doing what we're doing. So that is going to influence the amount of time that user is spending on site, but it could also indicate that there might be an issue with the mobile version of your site as well. The other point I'll just make there quickly with the type of engagement, often I see on mobiles there can be a lot of visits from social media. This is when you start doing breaking your reports down a lot further, because a lot of us use our social media almost primarily on our mobiles, with Facebook apps, Twitter, even Instagram, and we might click on a link to go and read something, particularly if people are sharing blog posts or courses in my case, but then we'll often, once we've read that, we'll jump back to our social app, and we won't just stay on the website and browse. So that can influence the mobile engagement as well, with how many pages people are viewing and how long they're looking at it for. But yeah, it is also important to consider the experience that those mobile users are getting, that it might not be enticing them to stay on your website and engage with all of your content there. So do get familiar with the breakdown of users across different devices on your site. And one other thing that's really exciting that's coming to Google Analytics in the next year, or sometime in the rest of this year, is they're going to be introducing some reports which show cross-device sessions as well. So again, trying to tap into the information that Google has available that's not personally identifiable, but can, through either logins or browsing similarities, be able to tie together my laptop with my mobile, with my tablet, and show me as one user that's viewing across 3 devices. So definitely share that when it comes out. That's going to be really, really exciting. I won't click into it at this stage because I'm just conscious of time, but it's also worthwhile having a look at the devices report that sits in that mobile report section, because that will show you the actual breakdown of mobile devices that people are using. And again, like that example where we're looking at browser and operating system, might give you a bit of an understanding of the people who are visiting your website, if they tend to be iPhone users, if they tend to be Android users, or again, just figure out when you are optimizing your site for mobile, which mobile devices are the most important to optimize for. based on the level of activity, so that those users, you want everyone to have a good experience, but the people who are, if they're predominantly iPhone users, then make sure your website works really well on that. If they're predominantly Samsung Galaxy users, make sure your website works really well on that, and test on those devices as well. Cool, so a couple more to go. I don't normally look at the benchmarking report, to be honest. My general recommendation is to focus on your own activity and you're improving your own website rather than just comparing yourself to other people. But when we are looking at users and building that profile, it can be useful to consider how you're performing against competitors as well. So this is not so much looking at your users, but users who may be looking at similar websites as well. So again, I also find this report definitely needs to be taken with a grain of salt, if not a spoon of salt, because it does rely on people selecting the right category for their website when they first set up Google Analytics, because that's what's actually drawing all this information together, and opt to share that information in benchmarking reports. So it may not be accurate or include specific competitors, but it may be worthwhile having a look at just to get a bit of a feel. There are other tools you can use if you want to be looking specifically at your competitors and comparing websites. Like SEMrush does some really good competitor analysis of websites. But yeah, do have a look in here. So like I mentioned, it does depend on what industry you've selected. And already we've got some issues because it's got me in internet and telecom by default. But I had actually changed this yesterday, so I'll double check that. But you can see here that we've got other industries that we can choose between. And I can look specifically at education, and if I want to look at training and certification. Okay, sorry, no, it's going to be showing that by default, but again, and you can change it depending on your audience, your industry. But it does rely on that setting that you have in your analytics settings as to what type of industry you belong to. We've also got a drop down here for country and region. So I can go down to Australia, and again, I want to look specifically at South Australia because that's my geographic focus. And then you have an option for size by daily sessions as well. And the smallest that you can go is the default 0 to 99. My site's currently getting an average, I think it's only about 15 to 20 a day. It's a bit low at the moment. It's had peak higher periods. So I'm going to keep it quite low, particularly being in South Australia. I know I have a smaller target audience there, so I'm going to keep it there, but you might choose to move it depending on your audience. And it's going to give you a number here of the number of web properties that contribute to this benchmark. So again, these are the ones who have actually chosen that topic, that industry classification in their analytics settings. Are also based in a particular region and also will have activity in a particular region and have some similar sessions there as well. And then we've got, I'm not going to spend heaps of time here, but we're looking at the channels first of all. So it's showing us all of our main channels, so direct, social, display, organic, referral, email, paid and other. And we've got the amount of traffic that's coming from our website from those channels versus the amount of traffic that is coming from other websites that conform to those same settings that we've collected here. And we've got some nice big green arrows where we can say that we're actually getting more traffic than the benchmark, and some red ones where we can see that we're getting less. That's based on the acquisition, so the number of those users, but we can also look into the behaviour as well, so which sites might be more engaging or less engaging than ours based on the number of pages per session, session duration and bounce rate as well. There's also a few other reports here for location and devices as well, so you can have a click around to that benchmark. But I'm just going to leave that there for now. Carolyn, thanks for your question. You just said you just enabled the cross-device beta report. Yes, that is the report that I was talking about, and that's so exciting that you have it. I need to look into my settings more and see if I have it available as well, so I can share some information about it on our next webinar that we do here. So yeah, that's rolling out. They announced it about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it should be rolling out to all users, I think, by the end of this year. So do look out for it there. Cool. So benchmarking. There's 2 more reports I wanted to show you, and then a bit on segments. I know we're going through a lot today, but like I said, I've got a screen that shows the list of all of these reports that we've gone through at the end. And if you haven't been playing along today, I definitely recommend setting aside about an hour or so and clicking through these reports. And you might just want to note down those characteristics that you identify of your users, so you can start to build a picture of who they are. So users flow is the next report we'll have a look at. And this is a nice data visualization that Analytics offers us. And it's showing how people, again, with different characteristics, move through your website. So it's not specifically profiling them, but again, it's giving you a good idea of all of the people, how they're moving through, and again, where there might potentially be some issues with your site based on the number of drop-offs versus the number of people who are going through. So by default, we can have a look at, it shows you country. So it's splitting up the traffic by the main country where your visitors come from, and then the smaller ones. And you can click on here and it gives you a few options. So you can either highlight the traffic that's coming from a particular audience characteristic. So we're still seeing all of the information on the screen, but it's showing us a bit more specifically where that traffic from Australia is coming through. It's rounding up the numbers here. So again, we're looking at website trends rather than specific information. We can also view just that segment. Like I mentioned, if we want to focus on just Australia because that's my geographic audience, let's get rid of everybody else, and we get a bit more room on the screen to see where those or how those types of visitors are moving through the site. Just give the screen share some time to catch up here. And we can hover over any of these to get some more information about the through traffic, so how much of that traffic has actually gone through. So we're looking at the first pages they've viewed here. The / indicates your home page, because the page URLs in Google Analytics show everything that comes after your domain, and the / is the only generally the only character that comes after your domain, unless you have index or something like that. So 58.2% of traffic have gone through onto another website, but 41.8% have dropped off. Again, we're looking at all users, so it might be people who have come here and realised that these courses are only available in Adelaide, so it's no point them looking any further. And we can see further what pages they viewed afterwards, and so on and so on. Another option that I like to use with these reports is actually looking at the channel that they've come from, and if that's had any influence on their engagement with the site and the way they're moving through the site. So this drop-down list either allows you to search for what it is you're looking for, if you know the dimension that you're wanting to view, or you can display all of them as an alphabetical list, and you can generate this report using any of these characteristics here. I actually know I want to look at default channel grouping, because this is the one that will show us that main breakdown of channels. So organic search, paid search, referral, direct, social, email, depending on what type of ways people are accessing your site. And again, it's ordering by the most traffic versus the least traffic. So if I wanted to specifically say, look at the social media traffic and highlight, okay, who's coming to my website from social media and what type of engagement are they having with the site, Again, what percentage of drop-offs are we getting? Which pages are they looking at? Particularly if we might also want to, again, another way is rather than default channel group, you might want to look at device category. Actually, that might be a better example. Let me do that one. But hopefully you're starting to get the idea here. Okay, sorry, users mobile, that's the one I wanted. Sometimes you need that alphabetical list is a bit easier. So if we just wanted to look at our mobile traffic, for example, this might help identify whether potentially issues with particular pages, because we might have a high number of drop-offs. And again, it's a prompt to potentially look at your website on that particular device, go through these pages and see if there is a clear next step for them to click on to view more and more pages, or is there something that is potentially encouraging those users to abandon the website and drop off from it because maybe it's difficult to browse on their particular device. So users flow is in that audience category as well, and good to have a click around with. Now, the one report I wanted to finish off with, it's actually back up near the top of the list, and I know I've shared this with in some previous webinars, but it's worthwhile sharing because it's one that, to be honest, I only started using about 3 or 4 years ago. It's called User Explorer. So it doesn't look like too much when you first click into it. It might actually look a little bit intimidating because it's just got this, client ID. What's a client ID? It's this random string of numbers. But the client ID is actually the unique code that Google assigns every individual user who comes to your website. And this collates, as much as it can, it collates all of their different visits that they've had and all of the different activity that has occurred from that particular user on the site as well. And you can click on any of these. It's not sharing personally identifiable information about them, but you can click on them and get a feel for how people, specific examples of people who are actually engaging with your website as well. As you can see here, I'm looking at a 12-month period, and there's 5,176 individual records, so I certainly wouldn't be looking at each of them individually, but you can sort them by things like average session duration, bounce rate, goal conversion rate, and those types of things. And I would just recommend clicking on a couple and having a look at how they're actually engaging with your site. So I'm going to go down to one of these ones here for someone who's actually spent a bit of time on the site. They've spent an average of 5 minutes on the site, and they've also converted on the site as well. So they've triggered one of my goal conversions, and they've had 28 individual sessions during this last 12 months. So I'm just clicking on their example, and what you'll see here is they're actually giving you what information they can gather about that unique user and the sessions they've had on the site as well. So this is really, really valuable information to understand exactly how people are using our websites. Google Analytics is generally focused on website trends, so we're gathering just a general information based on all of our users, but the User Explorer focuses specifically on individuals. So you can see here it's building a little profile picture on the left-hand side. We've got the date that they were last seen on the website, their dominant device category that they use, so desktop computer, the platform they're using, the acquisition date, which is the first time they visited the website, how they came to the website the first time, and then all of their engagements with the site during that time. And you can scroll down and see from the very first time they came to the website, there were 3 visits in January that came from organic search, viewed and shows how many pages were viewed, exactly what time of day, exactly what pages they viewed, and then coming back other times as well. So after that, they then came back through social and visited through social a few times. So you can begin to get that understanding of the relationship that your website has with particular users, how they might initially find you through organic search, but then they like your Facebook page or follow you on Twitter because that links on your website and you're sharing updates regularly, so they're coming back. or maybe you're engaging in Facebook remarketing based on user interaction with your website, and so on and so on. So we've got some really useful information here. Like I said, I certainly wouldn't be looking through all 1,500 records, but just picking out a few that can help you build a picture of the types of people who are potentially most engaged with your website, what they're looking at, how many times they're coming to your website before they're potentially converting or coming back as well. So I encourage you to spend some time. I'll give you some homework after this to click around in that user explorer there as well. Cool, so we're just about to wrap up. I'm just going to jump back to which report did I want to show this on? I'll explain why I'm doing this in a second. I'm just going to go back to our mobile devices report. And we'll jump back quickly to our slides. So these are the reports that we've just gone through. We've looked at demographics, interests, the location report, new versus returning, browser and operating system, mobile, benchmarking, users flow, and user explorer, which was back up the top of that list. And hopefully, by spending, like I said, you could spend an hour just clicking through these reports, you can start to build that picture of who the most engaged users with your website are. So for me, I know it's predominantly women between the ages of 25 and 44, mainly using mobile, seem to be very astute, interested in news and current affairs, and tend to be looking at the website during the week as well, because we got that from that audience overview report at the start. So you can start to put a bit of a picture there, check whether or not that actually lines up with the types of people you're trying to attract, or your original strategy as well, or use it to influence it. I also know that people who kind of like 55 and older are not interested in my website and my offerings. So certainly not going to block them from coming to the website, but I'm not going to be spending any money or energy on targeting those users either, because I want to focus on those people who are most engaged with my website. What we can also do with that information is use it to create segments, which allow us to be a lot more focused with our Google Analytics analysis. So a segment is a subset of sessions or users that share common attributes, and that's really what we've started to build with this profile. And these segments allow you to isolate groups of sessions or users individually for better analysis. So it can be very tempting to focus on all of the visitors who come to your website, because that's what gives you the big numbers. You can say we had, this many thousands of visitors over this time period, or hundreds of visitors, depending what your audience is. But if a lot of the visitors are coming from the wrong place, or they're not interested in your website, then they're really not going to be offering you that much value, apart from that vanity metric of the number of sessions or number of users. They can also, like we've already seen a little bit of, it can skew your engagement stats and those general engagement stats, because people who aren't interested in your website, it might be likely that they're bouncing, so they're contributing to a really high bounce rate. They're not spending very long on site. They're not viewing many pages, obviously, particularly if they're just bouncing straight off. They're not triggering any of your goals. So it is going, while you might have a high number of users or high number of sessions, it's actually going to drive that engagement with it down. So we want to focus on the people who are most engaged with our site, and look at how they're using it more specifically. So with segments, by default, as I mentioned, all of our reports show all users. So that's everyone who's come to the website that Google has been able to track because they have cookies and JavaScript enabled. Google Analytics includes a number of existing system segments that you can use, but you can also create your own custom segments as well, which is what I would encourage you to do after you have developed that profile of your ideal audience or ideal user, or even just focusing on the specific location that you've got as well. So we'll jump back into Google Analytics and I'll show you how this actually works. So as we can see up the top left here, We've got all users, and that's 100% of the users that Google Analytics have tracked during this time. And that's what we're looking at. Absolutely everybody who's come to the website in that time period that's been tracked. Next to that, we've got a faint grey box that says Add Segment. And it pops open to reveal this drop down, which has a number of segments listed there in alphabetical order. And this is all segments we're showing here at the moment. It's got all of them listed in alphabetical order, and you can see a tick next to all users, which is the one that it's showing by default. I already have a number of custom segments in here, so if you haven't set up or used segments before, then you will only have system segments. And do keep in mind that segments are shared across all of your accounts. So me as an individual Google account user, I have access to a number of Google Analytics profiles, and I can use these same segments across all of those profiles. I don't need to create them again and again. And you can also share them with other people on your team who may also be accessing your site, as well as just sharing it to the Google Gallery as well. So we've got those share options at the top. But if we click on System, there are a lot of useful segments that are just within the system. So we're probably going to run a couple of minutes over, but hopefully that's okay. If you need to go, the recording will be sent out so you can watch the rest of it later on. And we can see here that we've got, in our system segments, we've got all users, but you may also particularly want to look at bounce sessions, converters, direct traffic, people who made a purchase, mobile traffic, etc., etc. And if we click on just one of these, let's look at mobile traffic, for example. I can either have all users and mobile traffic clicked, or I can uncheck all users and just look at my mobile traffic, but I'll leave them both on so you can see. And I can click apply, and it's going to update. Actually, that's probably not the best report to show this on. It's going to update the report below and separate out the traffic from mobile versus all users again. So we can see here, because we're looking at a mobile report and we've got desktop and mobile, obviously all of our mobile traffic is going to be the same as all of users from mobile, and there's going to be no mobile traffic from desktop. Segments do not change your data permanently. They're not making any change. It's just kind of splicing the way we're looking at it. So you're not making any major changes to your account here. It's just allowing you to look at it more specifically. And you can add more than one or two segments as well. As you can see here, we can press plus and we can add more and more. But what I do want to show you, because we're just wrapping up with talking about users, is creating custom segments to really focus on our user profile. So I can uncheck all users and uncheck mobile. If I click on custom, I've actually already got a number of custom segments in here, but what I want to do is create a new segment. So I've just clicked on that new segment button, and you have all of these options on the left hand side that you can use to build a profile of your segment. So what I want to be doing is, because I know people between the ages of 25 to 44 are most engaged with my website, and women tend to be most engaged with my website, I want to have a segment that is just focused on them. So I can look at, once you've applied a segment, you can click through any report in Google Analytics just focusing on those people. And on the right hand side, so similar if you've used Facebook advertising and it builds that audience for you, letting you know how many people, it's actually breaking down and showing you what percentage of users of the total conform to those characteristics that you've determined there. I also, I could be clicking through technology and behaviour, traffic sources, etc. At this stage I'm not, but what I do want to look at is just focusing specifically on South Australia. So I'm going to go down to location and select region, because that's how Google Analytics helps us define states. I'm going to leave it on contains, and the great thing about all of these fields is it actually auto-populates from data within your website. So South Australia is sitting at the top there, and we can look again at, so 14% of users, so this is quite small, it's gotten quite small, age between 25 and 34, 25 and 44 who are female obviously within South Australia. That's as many as we have. We want to give our segment a name, and you want to give it something very descriptive so you know exactly what it is. So we can have 25 to 44, female, South Australia. You can edit the names and edit all of your segments as well. I'll click save. I'm actually going to remove my mobile audience here. There's an option there with your segments to show you which one you've actually selected, so you can uncheck that. So here I'm going to compare my target audience against all users. And it's broken up our table here where we can see their interaction with the website versus all users on the website. And then also specifically how they're using the different devices as well. So this is just the example that I was going to show with this report. Like I said, you can do it on any reports. I'm also going to change it to show you just quickly how you can navigate all of Google Analytics with this report on. And again, it's not changing our data. But we can see exactly when those visits occurred. We might want to scroll down to acquisition and look at which channels those users are specifically using to get to our website. Okay, my screen's just disappeared. Sorry guys, I have no idea what happened there, but I think you get the idea. And I'll wrap it up there because we are a couple of minutes over anyway. So just to recap quickly what we've looked at today and a bit of homework for you. I recommend setting aside an hour and running through these reports within your own Google Analytics if you haven't been doing so this morning. And building that picture of who it is that's actually coming to your website, either comparing it back against your target audience persona or using it to help build your ideal target audience persona as well, and considering how you can use that information to potentially influence other marketing activities. So if you're looking at doing some targeted advertising, focusing on those people who are most engaged once they get to your website, and potentially who to not include as well. Also consider creating a segment to focus on the people who are most engaged with your site as well. And there's a lot of system segments you can use there, or you can create some custom segments there as well. So hopefully that's been useful. And like I said, I absolutely love visitors and love all the information that you can get from Google Analytics to better understand your website and your visitors, but not just reporting for reporting's sake, using that information to improve the activity on your site as well. So thank you very much to everyone who's logged on. Apologies to those who haven't been able to. I've had some technical issues with the new system that I'm using, but we'll get it sorted out for the next webinar, which we will host soon. Feel free to tweet or Instagram or Facebook us. We're at Scout Social or facebook.com/Scout Social for all of our social channels, hashtag Scout Digital Training, and there's a number of courses that we have available coming up over the next few months on a whole heap of topics, not just Google Analytics, over on scoutdigitaltraining.com.au. We're also advertising our webinars over there as well as on our social channels, so you can keep in touch with them there. So I'll just turn the video back on quickly so I can say goodbye. Thanks everyone. I really hope you found that useful. Look forward to hearing any feedback, or if you've got any questions, or if that's been useful for you. Love to hear some examples of how you've actually used that to influence or improve or qualify your own digital marketing strategy and audience persona as well. I'll stay on the line here in case anybody has any questions in the chat box for a little bit longer, but do feel free to like I said, reach out to me if you do have any questions. So thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.